Greetings folks and welcome to the Electromaker Show. This is your midweek roundup of all things Maker and embedded and lovely. This week we have news, we have funding website things, we have projects, we have a lot to get through. So without any further ado, let's get started with the show. Ooh, I'm sorry, microphone. We're going to start this week's show with a quick look at a few projects, all unique in their own way, but we're beginning with something you don't see all that often, which is an aquatic Arduino project. Now this project from Yigit Yildirim on the Electromaker website is a completely DIY robotic fish, and as always I apologise if I'm mispronouncing that name, but this uses 4 regular servos and a linear servo along with an Arduino Nano, and some sensing equipment, an infrared sensor for distance sensing for when the fish gets towards the side of the pool, and a couple of LiPo batteries to power the whole thing. And personally, I'm quite a fan of how the fish looks. It uses a huge, thick balloon as the enclosure, because obviously the enclosure has to be watertight, because if any water gets inside, it'll ruin the electronics immediately. Here's the main mechanism right here. The idea is it's 4 simple hobby servos in these 3D printed cradles, and by tweaking values here, I managed to get it to move like a fish. The maker has got a couple of videos as well of this, so you can see it in action and also see how it was made. So there are actually 2 videos featuring this fish. This is the first one, which is just an example, and I think it really looks rather good. This guy is moving around, and when he gets to the side of the bath, he's making his own turns. As it says, there's some subtitles down here which are written after the fact. This isn't speech. This is just subtitles to say what was going on in the video itself, which is why I kept the sound off anyway. But yeah, the eyes use infrared sensors, as it says, and the linear servo. So there's one linear servo down the side that I have not mentioned, and that changes the balance of the fish, as mentioned. Yeah, it's just a wonderful DIY build, and it really looks quite compelling, don't you think? There is also a link to a very quick video. This isn't so much an instructional video, it's more a very quick whip through of how it all came together, showing the build at speed. But these are all things that are linked from the original tutorial on the Electromaker website that the maker has made. And it's just a really well thought out idea. And the maker is already mentioning in the comments to, I believe, this one, someone said, could you do a step-by-step tutorial? And the maker has already said they're currently working on a version 2, and they're going to do a much more thorough tutorial for that. So I hope they put that up on the Electromaker website as well, and I look forward to looking at that one when it comes, because I think we will definitely be coming back to this idea. Custom aquatics is something I find very fascinating indeed. And frankly, this little fish fella is pretty cute. Now, I was just at the right age where Tamagotchis were very, very big news indeed. Every single person had one. It didn't matter your gender. It didn't really matter your age. We were right on the cusp of the wave, and Tamagotchis were absolutely everywhere when I was at school. But this takes Tamagotchis everywhere to a completely new level. This is a maker called JC here, although I believe this is Jean-Christophe, I've forgotten his surname. Jean-Christophe Rona is the person who has taken the idea of the Tamagotchi and made it basically work absolutely everywhere. Created a version of the Tamagotchi with a hardware abstraction layer that would allow it to run on absolutely everything, and a few interesting tools as well to allow you to put your Tamagotchi, as you can see here, on say an STM32. You could just as easily have a fully fledged working Tamagotchi on your desktop computer as well. In fact, one of the examples is exactly that. And here is a Tamagotchi running on an STM32 with an OLED screen. And as you probably will remember, the original Tamagotchis had usually 2 to 3 buttons, or 3 to 4 buttons as it were, and a few simple things you can do, like feeding it and cleaning up after it had been to the toilet, all that kind of usual stuff. Now, there is a GitHub page, as I briefly showed, which has both the Tamalib, which is this hardware abstraction library, which will allow the Tamagotchi to run on pretty much everything. There's also a thing called Tamatool, which I find quite interesting. This is his personal website. And the Tamatool, I understand that the text is going to be quite small. There's not much I can do about that. However, I should point out this Hackaday article that I'm going to link, both of these links are from that article, so you can find it very easily. The Tamalib is the hardware abstraction library, like I have said. It works essentially as a, it says here, self-contained hardware OS agnostic Tamagotchi P1 emulation library. It handles everything related to the actual emulation, CPU and board, relying on a user-defined abstraction layer for the hardware OS related operations like graphics, audio, clock, and so on. So essentially, this will do everything as long as you tell it what your system is and what clock pace it should run at and all of that kind of stuff. Tama tool is very cool indeed. This allows you to extract data from the ROM in the form of a PNG file that can be used to modify it using an image. It basically allows you to create a custom Tamagochi. And it also works as a version of the Tama lib. It's a hardware abstraction layer, presumably for PC, maybe it's for Linux. I hadn't actually checked that. Here we go. Tama tool supports Linux, Windows with some limitations, and Mac OSs. There are even binary releases. Yes, if you were a Tamagotchi person, you will understand why this is exciting. If you weren't, you will probably wonder what on earth this section was about. Now, the idea of a Raspberry Pi laptop remains compelling, and of course there are things like the Pi Top, an educational focused laptop with a Raspberry Pi at its core that can be built by children. It's the idea behind it. And also there's things like CrowPi, which is a laptop-esque, but it also has a lot of Maker-esque sensors and tools underneath it. But I certainly think that the holy grail for a lot of us is this idea of taking a Raspberry Pi and completely building from scratch a custom-designed laptop. It's something that I know I'd like to do, and it's something that someone on the Electromaker website has just done. Now, this project from Raushan Kumar is not the first custom Raspberry Pi laptop I have seen, but it might be the best looking. I'm going to spend very little time on this because it is an incredibly long tutorial that takes you through everything you need to create a laptop with its own power supply, which has speakers, which has everything that a laptop needs. If I just want to come down to the bottom and show you how nice it looks in its finished form, because as you can see, there's quite a lot here. But this is one of the nicer looking 3D printed laptops I have seen. It's just a really nice design, I find. And as you can see, it uses a keyboard that integrates the mouse. And it's, yeah, the folding mechanism is nice. It looks very compact when it's closed. It looks like it might be quite sturdy. It uses a Raspberry Pi 4, so it will have a bit of grunt to it. And as mentioned, it has things like usable USB ports, everything broken out, and sound. So if you are interested, you can head here and read the incredibly thorough tutorial. And they have also made a version of the build on their YouTube channel as a video. One thing you may have noticed here also is that this runs Windows 11, which is a bit of a bonus. I haven't even fiddled with Windows 11 on a proper desktop computer yet, so maybe a Raspberry Pi would be the perfect place to get a little taste of it and see what I'll be doing in about a year's time when I finally upgrade. Very briefly to close out this section, this is actually an advert for Toya on James Bruton's YouTube channel. Now, featuring someone else's advert on this show seems like a very weird thing to do, and I understand that. But in short, we aren't advertising Toya. They make IoT products that look kind of cool. But as part of this sponsored video, James has created a completely off-grid microwave. Yes, when you think of going camping, the one thing that you do not think of taking with you usually is a microwave, because they are bulky, but mostly because they take an inordinate amount of power. So the idea of a remote-controlled microwave in a smart home, I suppose, kind of guess it makes sense, but a travel IoT microwave is not something that I think has been a sentence that has been said all that often before this video was made. However, what you can see here is a custom case with an inverter on it. Inside the inverter are 4 very powerful robotics or flight batteries, I can't remember which. All of the hardware, software gubbins from Toya. Again, he explains it very well, obviously, because it's the reason this video got made in the first place. And yeah, ends up with a completely off-grid microwave. Yeah. I am fairly certain that this is the highest order of trolling I've ever seen, because who puts milk in lemon and ginger tea? Even oat milk. James, you're wrong. We are on crowd supply, which can only mean one thing. It is time for funding website things. And a few of you can probably already see why I chose this one. This is exactly the kind of thing I love. I may have even brushed over this when it was pre-launch. I cannot remember if I did or I didn't, but either way, it is now launched. They are raising funds for it. And yes, an open-sourced Arduino-compatible ESP32 based audio development board. All things I love to hear. So, as you can see from the video, it has audio inputs and outputs. It has a microphone array on it as well, but if I skip back slightly further into the video, you'll see the immediate thing that came to my mind when I first saw this, and that is to make custom rack-mounted synthesizer modules. Because you could use this for so many things. You could use it for creating control voltages, or you could use it for creating tones all by itself. The ESP32 is powerful enough to do all of those things, and a little bit of DSP knowledge goes a long way. I frequently come back to this thing that we talked about it on the show before. The people that make Bella, which is another music-based board, have a fantastic DSP course online, which I would recommend anybody following, whether you own a Bella board or not. This is something a little bit different, and something I'm equally interested in. I think it's a very interesting idea. In terms of specs, it has the ESP32 Pico D4 processor, which is a 32-bit dual-core processor, which has both Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, and it has pretty high-quality analog-to-digital conversion for all of the audio on board, as well as 2 MEMS microphones. So it actually has microphones already on the board itself, which is quite nice if you want to use it for just hearing sounds or being triggered by sounds, or even if you just want to take some slightly lower quality audio in to maybe do some work with and fiddle with it. I could see some very interesting ideas for a board which had its own independent audio input and output, and the amount of effect that you put on the output audio would be down to what kind of noise the MEMS microphone heard. I am flailing wildly at that idea, but that is the first thing that comes to my mind. Now, the price. The original edition is $34. There is a early bird edition, and this is only just gone live, so you can still get this. There are 19 of these left. For just $29, you can get the Pico DSP board. By the time you read this, there will be only 18 left, because I'm going to get one of these, of course. This is right up my street. I will not say anything more about this. I could talk about this all day. This is a very, very interesting audio-based board. It is compact. It uses a well-known processor. You can program it using the Arduino IDE or the ESP IDF, whatever they call it. Yes, what a fantastic idea. The Pico audio board, the Pico DSP. Yes, there we go. I'd already forgotten the name of it. What a lovely idea. I look forward to seeing what people make with this one. Now, I think many of us have various forms of these. Your general helping hand, which attaches to your desk or stands on a heavy stand, and then you have different arms that can move in different ways. Some of them move up and down on single pieces of cut metal. This is one of those kind of bendy ones. I'll be absolutely honest, I use this sometimes, but it's actually a little more annoying to use than it's worth, and a lot of the times I still end up just using my third hand or balancing things on my knee, or holding the soldering iron in my teeth. Not really. This is supposed to take away that. And when I first looked at it, I thought it didn't really look like it would help. And then by the end of the Kickstarter video, I was absolutely convinced that this, as simplistic as it is a fantastic idea. So, in essence, what you are seeing is an inertial measurement unit on the soldering iron, and it follows and moves around depending on what you wanted it to do. And when I first saw this part, I thought that is the least useful thing I've ever seen. That is ridiculous. But it's actually incredibly smart, because this is just showing off the tracking, but that little switch you can see underneath here, you set it where you want it, you flick the switch, and then you can just work. As simplistic as that is, it is such a revelation, the idea that you can just flick the press the button, flick the soldering iron up in the air to turn the angle up, press the button again, and then just keep going. You could, as I said, in theory, you could just try and move these arms, but these never work the way that you want them to. I really am sold on this idea. It is such a simple thing. Not only is the idea really good, I really like the approach of this maker as well. One of the things I love about this as well is that it is a Kickstarter, but it's also somewhat of an instructional. Because it shows you exactly how this was put together, and even gives, a little bit of the example code. And in fact, the first level you can buy, apart from just pledging without a reward, you get the code and the STL files, which means essentially you can just buy your own parts and make it yourself, which I think is a really nice thing. But I mean, to be honest, for $45, you get the full kit. And again, I understand that for some people they might think this is a little bit fancy and over the top, and if you've got a helping hand and it works perfectly for you, then fine. But this, to me, is something that would solve just one of the small annoyances I have in my life, which is the fact that my helping hand is rubbish, and I've never used one that actually seemed to be helpful. And the idea of just a gesture-based flick to move it to where I wanted it to be and then set it and get back to soldering is such a simple, revelatory thing that I thought it was definitely worth featuring on this week's show. Now, usually on funding website things, we talk about single products, but today I want to talk about a category, and that category is makerspaces. Because makerspaces have been having a little bit of a tough time around the world, really, for obvious reasons. They're places where we come together, and we haven't been able to do that, and that has a financial burden attached to it. And of course, trying to start new makerspaces, trying to stock makerspaces, these are all things that cost money, and money hasn't necessarily been the easiest thing to come by in terms of, again, places where people come together publicly. So I wanted to point out, without pointing out any specific one, that Kickstarter has a category for makerspaces. If you go through here, you will find makerspaces all over the world, all offering different things, all wanting to do different things. You might find ones that are close to you, or you might find ones who are just in a different part of the world. There are some filters here, so you can filter by locations if you want. You're also able to filter by whether it's magic filtering, that Kickstarter has its own magic algorithm, or popularity or newest, things like that. I don't want to point out any specific one for obvious reasons. I'd rather you spent the time to go through and see if there's anything that you think that you could financially support right now. For my own end of this, opening a makerspace is somewhat of a dream of mine, but not one that's particularly achievable right now. But knowing that I could maybe help another makerspace actually who are much closer to doing it, do it, is something that I'm interested in doing. And I thought you might be as well, so I thought I'd include it in this week's show. Before moving on, a very quick piece of housekeeping. If you are not already subscribed to the Electromaker YouTube channel, please consider doing so. Just under the video here, this subscription button, you click it, then you are subscribed to our channel. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to get spammed with notifications from us. It just means that when you go to the subscriptions area on your channel, videos will show up. As it happens, this is the only thing that this channel is subscribed to, so there's quite a lot of me in there, but every subscribed video will be here in a nice digest for you. Now, one thing you can do if you really are enjoying the show is sign up for some notifications, and you do that by clicking this little bell here and selecting all. Now, that won't give you desktop notifications unless you've enabled them in your browser, but it will mean that this little notification bell here in the top right will be populated with the shows that we put out. Every time we upload to the channel, you will get a little notification here. However, we upload once a week only to the Electromaker channel. Typically, there are exceptions to that, but mostly once a week. So you will come to YouTube, you'll have a little nice notification mark here, and you will see a show has gone up the moment that it has. And of course, if you like the show, clicking like is very useful too. It doesn't just show us that you like it, but it shows YouTube that you like it. And in fact, all three of these things are really a way of you telling YouTube that you like the show enough that you think it is worth sharing, rather than telling us directly. It does really, really help us. So those three things are things that you can do to help us on YouTube. And there's no obligation to do any of it, but if you do, it will help us a lot. We also have a Discord server, and you can find a link to that in every single video, along with on the Electromaker website. It's free to join, anyone can join it, and we're looking forward to it becoming a nice community where people can share things they're working on and generally chat, and maybe help each other out when they get stuck on a bit of electronic projects and coding and things like that. And finally, we have a shop. I know some of you have been heading to the shop already to get components for your maker projects. It is massively appreciated. This is definitely the best way that you can support us. It is a direct financial contribution to the show. But in general, if you are supporting the show in any one of the ways I've just said, I would like to thank you so much. This channel is growing quite quickly, and it is very, very nice to see, and it is thanks to you showing us support, so thank you very much for that. But anyhow, let's get on with the rest of the show. This week we have no mystery box competition, but that is only because we have a very special competition in its place. Now, you may remember a couple of weeks ago we gave away one of the other Nordic development boards. These are the development boards for Nordic small system on chips, which are all Bluetooth low energy, some of which work with SIM cards and are LTE and can work anywhere in the world. Those development boards are fantastic, but this is one of my favorite little things Nordic makes. This is the Nordic Thingy. The Thingy 91. Now, I've already done some quality second camera work, so you can see it a little bit better. But essentially, this is a tiny little development kit for working with a SIM card and doing pretty much anything you want to do. They've packed a huge amount into this tiny form factor. Now, you can see on the back here that there is a battery in here. And you're hopefully seeing from the second camera as well that there's a bunch of different things on it. But it isn't that clear just from the camera itself, so let me quickly read out to you some of the things that this little thing has. On board, it has temperature, humidity, air quality, and air pressure sensing. It has a light and color sensing. It has an onboard buzzer, a high G accelerometer, a low power accelerometer, a battery connector, and of course this comes with the battery, and a power switch, a USB connector, which you can program through, I believe, and a program debug connector, as well as an NFC antenna connector. So you can probably see again in the quality second camera footage that there is this little thing hanging off the side of it. And that is your NFC aerial. There is a lot to like about these little boards. They are the perfect way to get started with completely remote and nets-based programming, although nets is the German word for it, isn't it? Cellular programming, I suppose, is the word. And we are going to give this away today. And just very quickly, the document that I was reading this all from, just because I feel like it might be a little bit easier for you to see if I put myself maybe out of the way up here. This is the circuit board that it is all based around. So yes, as you can see, this is the system in package, as it is called, system on chip, system in package, and all of the different things that I was referring to. And one of the things I didn't mention is the user assignable button, and of course the slot for putting the SIM card in, which is, by the way, it comes with a SIM card, an iBasis SIM card, which should just work straight out of the box with it. I found, just for my particular region, the iBasis SIM card didn't work for me, but I went to the local shop and got a pay-as-you-go SIM card, slotted it in, worked straight away, no problem whatsoever. Depending on where you are, you might find that this iBasis SIM card comes, and if I remember correctly, if you do use the iBasis SIM card that come with the Nordic kits, I think you get a little bit of free usage of it, but please do not quote me on that. Anyway, the point is, this is one of my favorite little development kits. It's such a cute little thing. I love the way that the LED lights up the plastic inside it. I love that this soft silicon case is sort of just feels nice. I've waxed lyrical enough about it. The point is, I love these things, but we're going to give this one away to someone from the show. But this is not your average mystery box giveaway. You're going to enter using a few certain parameters. So the question is, if you had a Nordic Thingy 91, what would you do with it? I've previously mentioned that this has a bunch of different sensors on for movement and your surrounding environment and a buzzer. I forgot to mention that it actually has some little MOSFETs for driving motors on it as well. And there's a bunch of different breakouts for this thing as well. It's really well designed to be as useful as possible. And of course, it works with all of Nordic's software. If you had this, what would you do with it? That's the one thing that I would like to know. To enter, leave a comment on this video saying what you would make with the Nordic Thingy 91 development kit. And you need to be a subscriber to this channel to take part in the competition. And the other thing to hashtag it is just Thingy91. Thingy91, no spaces. That will be the hashtag for this competition. And yes, these are lovely little things. I'm really looking forward to giving it away to one of you. Best of luck, and I will announce the winner to this next week. We're going to close out the show with a little news as well as a look at a quite interesting project in its early stages that I think might take off. But before that, we're going to talk about Risc V once again. And I know we're talking about it quite a lot, but it's because it's a very exciting time in Risc V. This platform specification, there's actually 2 draft platform specifications for Risc V, meaning that the platform specification being a distinct set of descriptors that if you follow, you can be sure that your OS or your application will run on Risc V hardware. It's the same as ARM System Ready. These are things that I academically understand exist and have never actually had to work in the industry for, but if you are an embedded engineer, you probably understand how the platform for ARM works and how Risc V so far has not really had anything like that. This is the first attempt to get that. Now, there's 2 different versions. There's the OSA platform. This, as it says, specifies rich OS platform for Linux, FreeBSD, and Windows. And then there's the M platform, which is for real-time operating systems and bare metal. This is from the fantastic CNX software. We almost always end up here, one of my favorite websites. In this particular instance, they found this via a LinkedIn post from Drew Fustini, who actually linked back to the Risc V platform GitHub here. So this is a chunky document. I've got about, I don't know, a third of the way into it, skim reading it, and it's quite heavy. It's something that I really do want to read through and try and understand from the top to the bottom, because despite the fact I only know it in an academic way, I do sort of understand how the system-ready platform for ARM works, just because I had to write about it once, and I would like to really know more about this. But if you are interested in Risc V, this is a great step in order to make it easier for everyone to work with it, and I will link the CNX software article in the description of this video, because you can then click through to Drew's LinkedIn comment from it, and of course straight out of LinkedIn to this GitHub page if you would like. Just briefly, I want to talk about Planet Debug. Now, this is something that was sent to me, and it's a really compelling project. What you're seeing here is what looks a bit like a server rack, but instead of it being a server, what it is a bunch of hardware development boards in situ with a bunch of controllable cameras, meaning that you can program hardware and debug it and see what's happening with it remotely. It's such a compelling idea, as you can see here, and if I quickly jump over to their website, you can get a better idea of it as well. They have their own piece of software here, which has an IDE in it and a debugger in it, but also a live video feed of whatever hardware you are working with. Look here, there's STM32, here's an EasyPick version 8, Fusion for STM32. So these are all different ways of talking to the boards. And then, yeah, you can, without owning any of the hardware, without having any of the hardware with you, program it. I've obviously come across people working on remote servers. That's how many people work remotely. They're not working on code locally, or if they are, they're just testing code locally to run it on the server. That's how almost everything works. The idea of having a hardware server, or at least a hardware prototyping tool, is a really compelling idea, and one that I've never really come across before. But then again, why not? Remote control cameras, remote control debugging, hardware in a different room somewhere or a different building somewhere, and you with a small laptop sitting on the beach. Sounds like a fine way to program hardware, if you ask me. So the Planet Debug website has a bunch of information as to how you can try it out if you would like to, but for now I will leave a link to this YouTube video because their website is in the description here, and also you'll get to hear it described in their own words that way too. Finally this week we are taking a look back. This is a blog post on the Raspberry Pi website from October 2020, and since we featured so many Compute Module 4 boards on this show, I thought it might be quite nice to look back at the blog post that was written around the time of its release. Because I remember reading this at the time, and I don't think it made it into the show for whatever reason, but it's a very good read. This is essentially just a blog about the process of the Raspberry Pi Compute module, and there's a quite nice video of it as well on the Raspberry Pi YouTube channel. And essentially this is just saying, this is kind of like a very long announcement for the Raspberry Pi 4 Compute module, the Compute Module 4, sorry. And even though we're so used to hearing about it, and some of us probably own one or several of them and use them every day, it's really nice to hear in the words of the people who designed it, the changes they wanted to make and how those changes would work. So I'm actually not going to say much more than that. I'm going to leave a link to this blog post in the description of the video. It's well written, and it's about a thing that we all know and love and use. If not the Compute Module 4, of course, I'm pretty sure everyone watching the show owns a Raspberry Pi at least. As I say, it doesn't always have to be about the cutting edge. There's enough cutting edge Raspberry Pi compute modules and computers and everything cropping up at the minute. Sometimes it's quite nice to go back and just look at how a thing came to be, and this is a very succinct and nice way of doing that. That has been our show for this week. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for all of the support you are showing this show on YouTube, and of course by joining the Discord server and shopping at the Electromaker store. I will be back next week with a whole host of new, interesting and cool things to look at, but for now I wish you a safe, creative and fun week, and I will see you in the next one.